Tensions are high in the Pacific as North Korea is suspected of firing an intercontinental ballistic missile. This comes a day after North and South exchanged missile tests.
Russia performs an abrupt U-turn, rejoining a UN brokered deal to allow the safe shipment of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea.
Tigrayan rebels and the Ethiopian government have signed a peace deal ending nearly 2 years of war, which led to a humanitarian disaster in the region.
Tensions are high in the Pacific after North Korea fired 3 missiles towards Japan, including a suspected intercontinental ballistic missile. While it was established that one fell into the sea without crossing into Japanese waters, it did trigger air raid sirens. This comes a day after the North fired over 20 missiles at the South, sparking Seoul's anger and retaliation.
North Korea's continuous ballistic missile launches are acts of serious provocation that threaten the security and stability of not only the Korean peninsula, but also the world. It is also a clear violation of a UN Security Council resolution.
Despite reports the ICBM launch may have failed, the missile firings are seen as an escalation, worrying an already tense Japan.
Missile launches are outrageous and totally unacceptable. I instructed officials to determine any damage and to properly provide the Japanese public with information.
The 20 missiles fired the day before by Pyongyang mark the most launches in a single day ever by the country. The latest tests come as the US and South Korea run joint military exercises in the area.
A comforting sight. Ships loaded with Ukrainian wheat and sunflower oil were seen crossing the Bosphorus within hours of Russia saying it will rejoin the UN-brokered grain deal. Moscow's climb down came after high-level diplomatic talks between Turkey, one of the guarantors of the scheme. Its president announced there had been a breakthrough after a phone call between the Turkish and Russian defense ministers. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was quick to thank Recep Tayyip Erdogan for his efforts. In his nightly address, he said the return of the deal was important to the whole world and that there was one threat to global food security, the Russian Federation. President Vladimir Putin says he received sufficient guarantees from Kyiv that a maritime corridor would be demilitarized so he could rejoin the agreement. Moscow's withdrawal had reignited fears over global hunger. The reaction followed what it called a drone-targeted terrorist attack on its Black Sea fleet in Russian-annexed Crimea.
The White House has admitted to becoming increasingly concerned about a potential Russian nuclear strike in Ukraine. U.S. intelligence sources claim Russian military leaders have discussed how and when they might use nuclear weapons on the battlefield. A statement released by Russia's Foreign Affairs Ministry on prevention of nuclear war said Russia would be justified to hypothetically resort to nuclear weapons exclusively in response to an aggression involving the use of weapons of mass destruction when the very existence of the state is in jeopardy. The White House's National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says such talk is irresponsible.
We still have not seen any indication that the Russians are making preparations for such use, but this is all deeply concerning to us, and it would be as irresponsible as it is for Putin to talk the way he is. It would be equally irresponsible for us not to take that and any other indicator that we're watching seriously.
As Russia's losses on the battlefield have mounted, its nuclear threats appear to have increased. But Moscow is accusing the West of deliberately pumping up the topic.
An estimated 14 million Ukrainians have been driven from their homes since Russia's war began, making it the fastest and largest displacement witnessed in decades. That's according to the UN. Its refugee chief, Filippo Grandi, told the Security Council that the EU's response counters previous doubts that the bloc can support refugees.
Meanwhile, in the European Union, we have seen an open, well-managed and above all shared refugee response that has proven wrong many of the statements frequently repeated by some politicians, that Europe is full, that relocation is impossible, that there is no public support for refugees.
Grandi also pointed to other conflicts that have not received the same international attention, outrage, and resources given to Ukraine, adding that in the past 12 months, the agency responded to 37 emergencies. And some conflicts, such as the one in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, which has displaced more than 850,000 people, has had an even more devastating impact on civilians. Poland lacks coal, even though it is the European Union's second largest producer behind Germany. The steady decline of its own production, the embargo on Russian imports, and inflation have cornered around 2 million people in Poland whose heating systems still heavily depend on it. Czakek is one of them, a retired miner in the Silesia region, the very heart of the country's coal mining industry. He says he used to receive 3 tons of complementary coal every winter, but not anymore. He claims there is nowhere around to buy it.
This is all the coal left for winter. 25 years down in the mines and I have nothing. I don't have any coal. There is no place to buy. There is no money to buy it. That's it.
Prices are 4 times higher than they were in spring, and the cost is mounting. Dramatic as it may already seem, the situation could get even worse. Coal's share in power generation in Poland is the highest in the EU. So now coal scarcity and prices are also actively contributing to skyrocketing energy bills.
Coal crisis is not only affecting homeowners. Hundreds of towns now suddenly find themselves in the eye of the storm. This is one of them, a small touristic city of around 23,000 inhabitants.
Faced with an increase of around 700% in energy bills, the city of Sandomierz has already said essential social services like schools, swimming pools, and public libraries can soon be affected. Even the local hospital, the second biggest employer in the region that cares for some 20,000 patients every year, is bracing for a challenging winter. Essential services should not be concerned, but some decisions could affect patients and their families.
One of these things would be limiting the visiting times for families and friends. That would allow us to turn off the lights in corridors and waiting rooms, so the lighting time would be shorter.
The government has promised subsidies to help deal with the crisis, but nobody knows if they will be enough to fare out the winter.
The Ethiopian government and rebels from the northern Tigray province have agreed to a permanent cessation of hostilities. No one knows how many have died, but over 2 years of brutal war, the number is thought to be in the hundreds of thousands. It also unleashed a major humanitarian crisis.
As far as both parts are concerned, we have made painful concessions because addressing the pains of our people is far more important than the kinds of concessions we have made.
The war began in late 2020 after government forces invaded the region, accusing Tigrayan forces of rebellion. The African Union has welcomed the news as a new dawn, but the full text of the peace deal hasn't been released, with former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta warning that the devil will be in the detail. For now, there are hopes that food aid can be resumed. According to the World Health Organization, 90% of people in the region need humanitarian assistance.
Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz has been formally sentenced to life in prison without parole. A jury last month voted for the defendant to be spared the death penalty, a decision which outraged relatives of the victims. In 2018, Cruz opened fire in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, killing 17 people and wounding 17 more.
A COVID-19 panic drove a mass breakout from an iPhone factory in China. Hundreds of workers were seen fleeing the facility to avoid a sudden lockdown after a virus outbreak. The country's authorities, who follow a zero-tolerance policy for COVID-19 cases, have now imposed strict measures on 600,000 people in the area surrounding the factory.